find that one of the questions I get most often from people who've recently learned how to do calligraphy and are now doing lots of fun projects is, how do I do my lettering without guidelines? Everyone's feeling a little more confident with their lettering by that point, and they don't want to use graph paper, they don't want to use rulers, they're feeling like they could just freehand it. So what's the best way to do that? The answer is you don't. Ever. Let me explain. Now, obviously, when you're practicing, it's a no-brainer to just use paper that has guidelines, like this Rhodia paper, or put tracing paper over top of a workbook. If you've ever been confused about paper for calligraphy, you can go watch this video. It's a whole separate topic. But Rhodia and tracing paper are the most common things you would use when you're practicing and when you're learning. But once you start doing your own calligraphy projects and you want them to be pretty and you don't want them to have guidelines on them, what do? Well, like I said, you don't ever just go rogue and not use guidelines. A lot of people think that they're just supposed to get good enough at calligraphy that they don't need guidelines anymore, and that's just not the case. It's very, very, very rare that I would ever freehand any lettering anywhere without any guidelines. Unless obviously the goal was to create something that's totally not straight, then that's fine. But if you're trying to do straight lettering, you always need some kind of guideline. There are some ways to get around having to use a ruler all the time and measure all the time. And for that, I have 5 specific hacks for you. The first one is specific to doing stuff on paper, and that is to use what's called a light box. So this is a light box. This is called the Cricut Bright Pad. And if I turn it on, it's going to affect all the lighting in the video, so I'm going to leave it off for as long as possible. But basically, a light pad is really helpful because you could do an entire layout of something. Let's pretend that this short quote is actually much longer and it takes up maybe the whole page. And you're doing like song lyrics or something like that. So let's say you wrote this whole thing out and you did it with your guidelines and everything's perfectly centered, and now you want to get it onto a good copy piece of paper, so this paper doesn't have any guidelines. What you would do with your light box is you would just turn on your light box, put your good paper over top of your rough copy, and then you can trace it through so that now you've used the guidelines to do all of your centering and all of your layout, but you won't have them transfer through onto your good copy. A light box is really helpful as well for thicker paper if you wanted to put this onto watercolor paper or Bristol paper or something thicker for a good copy. Light boxes are the best. I actually have a whole video about this specific one. You can go and watch it here if you want to see a little bit more about it, but light pad would be hack number 1. This next one you might have seen me talk about before on this channel. I have a whole review about it. I demonstrate a lot more in detail about this product in this video, but it's using a laser level or a mini laser square. So this one, for example, if I had a piece of paper that I wanted to write on, it shoots this red line across and I can move it up and down and have that perfectly straight line. The other thing that I often use is actually just a laser level that you can get at the hardware store. I have a whole video about that here. And that works really well on bigger surfaces like wood and chalkboards. The only downfall with both of these options is that it only shoots across one line. So you only have the baseline to work off of. You don't have a baseline and a waistline, so you can't get the top and the bottom of the letter. But if you're just working, if you're just trying to get a word fairly straight on a board and you're pretty comfortable with your calligraphy and lettering, then usually a baseline is just fine. Okay, the third hack is to use a graphite or a chalk transfer. So let's say you've written out, again, let's use this as an example, a big calligraphy piece on the paper with the guidelines to get everything all perfect. You can do a graphite transfer to get it perfectly onto your good copy piece of paper, so you don't need to measure guidelines at all. So again, if you're going from paper to paper, graphite is the way to go. So what you would do is you would take this piece that you've created and you would turn it upside down, and you would go over the back of it. I'll do it a little bit. I'm not going to do the whole thing precisely for this video, but you would go over the back of what you've written with a pencil. Ideally a pencil with really soft lead. So 2B, 3B, 4B, anything higher than HB. HB is also fine if that's the only thing you have. I'm also not going to add in my thicknesses for the purposes of this video because it's just going to take too long. But you would trace this as precisely as you can. If you don't have a light box, if you can't really see through it, and if you don't have a light box, you could put it up on a window, trace it through as well as you can. And then you're going to turn it back upside down, place it onto your good copy, and trace it through again. Now you can either go over it precisely, or you could just apply some pressure to it and it'll transfer through onto your good copy. So this is a really easy hack to do. You can also do this with chalk. So let's say I wanted to do a bigger piece, something like these letters in the word high. Let's say I wanted to put this exact design that I've measured out perfectly on my graph paper onto a piece of wood. What I would do for this is the same thing. I would turn over my design and I would trace through, it's hard to see with that wood there. I would trace this through with chalk as precisely as I can. I'm not doing this very precisely for the purposes of this video because I'm trying to go quickly, but I think you'll understand the idea. So now this word that I'm tracing is perfectly measured, perfectly straight, everything I need it to be. And I can take it, place it wherever I want it on the board, and then use my pencil or something else with, you know, a hard tip to apply the pressure to the board. And then when you lift that up, you have a perfect transfer onto your board. So that is a really, really helpful hack for bigger signage. Chalk would even work on, you know, windows. If you pressed hard enough, it would work on glass, it would work on mirrors, all sorts of stuff. So graphite or chalk transfer is the next hack. Okay, this next hack is to use tape. So this option is definitely more for bigger pieces you're working on, again, like this piece of wood or signage or something like that. So basically you would just measure out where you need your guidelines to be, and then you can use your tape as your baseline and your waistline. So let's say I've measured out exactly the height and the placement of where I want my lettering on this board. Usually I would take a tape measure and make a mark on this side where I want it and a mark on this side and then line up the tape. But this is just to show you. So you would place your tape down and then you can easily use that as your waistline and that as your baseline and not have to draw in any extra guidelines. But yeah, so tape would be hack number 4. And then lastly, another one again for bigger signage would be to actually just use chalk or chalk marker to draw your guidelines and then erase it afterwards. So let's say I wanted to write something on this piece of wood and I've measured out vertically where I need my guidelines to be. I can use my chalk really lightly to draw in some guidelines. Let's pretend these are straight and measured. And then you can use your paint marker to write on here. So you have this as your waistline or baseline and your waistline. Let's say, again, I wanted to write the word high. And let's pretend that this marker is not dying. This marker is completely dead, but hopefully you can see that. So now I've used the waistline and the baseline to get my lettering in there. And then once the paint pen has dried, you can actually just erase the chalk and the paint marker will stay. So sometimes it takes a little bit of elbow grease to rub that off, but the chalk will come off and the paint pen won't. Now, obviously for this option, you need to know which pens to use on which surfaces, which is something that Mabs and I talk about, and we have cheat sheets for all inside our signing up course. It's all about signage. So if that's something you're interested in learning, you can find that at signingupcourse.com. But basically, as long as you know that your paint marker is permanent on the surface that you're using, you can erase chalk itself or chalk marker. You can use both for this hack. Let me know in the comments if you've ever used any of these hacks, which one is your go-to, or if you've even done anything different that I didn't mention here. I always loved learning new hacks like this. As always, I hope this was helpful, and if it was, I would love it if you would hit subscribe to the channel. I put out new videos every single week, so I hope to see you around for more.